The message glowed on my phone screen at 3:07 a.m., casting an eerie blue light across my cramped barracks room in Munich. My new girlfriend and I just bought our dream home with your savings. She's everything you'll never be. I stared at the photo attached, my husband Jason grinning beside a young blonde woman, both holding a sold sign in front of a 2-story craftsman with the wide wraparound porch I'd dreamed about since childhood. My porch. My dream home. Bought with my money. My name is Olivia Ramirez. I'm a 37-year-old logistics officer in the United States Army currently deployed at a base in Germany. For the past 6 months, I'd been coordinating complex supply chains across 3 countries, while my husband back in Portland had been exploring what he called his entrepreneurial freedom, which apparently meant exploring unemployment benefits and evidently my bank account. I set my phone down carefully, my hands steadier than they had any right to be. Around me the base was quiet, except for the distant hum of generators and the occasional footsteps of night patrol. Outside my window, fat snowflakes drifted lazily through the cone of a street lamp. I'd been sending money home every month. $2,000 religiously transferred to our joint account. Money that we'd both agreed would help my aging parents with retirement and serve as our house down payment when I returned. The rage would come later. Right now, I felt something colder, more calculating forming in my chest. "Wow, you're so smart." I typed back, my fingers moving with deliberate calm. Jason had always been impulsive, but this crossed every line we'd drawn in our 10 years of marriage. The woman in the photo, all fake tan and Instagram poses, looked young enough to be his daughter. According to the caption, her name was Elise. Everything about the situation screamed desperation and midlife crisis. I scrolled through other photos he'd sent over the past week. Jason at restaurants I couldn't afford, even on my officer's salary. Jason buying expensive wine. Jason and Elise on shopping trips, her arms loaded with designer bags. Each image felt like a deliberate slap, designed to show me how much better his life had become without me. What he didn't know was that a month ago I'd received a fraud alert from our bank. I'd been too busy with a major supply shipment to investigate properly, but now the pieces were falling into place. Something about unauthorized access attempts and signature verification issues. At the time, I'd assumed it was a system glitch. The photo of the house haunted me most. It wasn't just any house, it was the exact style we'd talked about buying together. The one with the wraparound porch where I'd imagined us growing old, watching sunsets, entertaining grandchildren someday. He'd taken our shared vision and twisted it into his betrayal. I closed my eyes, picturing my mother's face. The last time we'd video called, she'd looked more fragile than I wanted to admit, dark circles under her eyes betraying the pain she tried to hide. The surgery she needed wasn't optional anymore, and that money, my money, was supposed to help pay for it. My throat tightened as I imagined telling her that the funds were gone. I reached for my secure phone. It was time to make some calls. The next morning, I sat across from Captain Sofia Martinez in the JAG legal office, a small room that smelled of burnt coffee and determination. Sofia was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed with silver streaks in her dark hair that she wore in a tight bun. The kind of woman who'd seen enough military spouse betrayals to fill several volumes, but still found the energy to be angry about each one. "Tell me everything," she said, sliding a legal pad across the desk. I handed her my phone, showing the photos and messages. "My husband emptied our joint savings to buy a house with another woman. He's been unemployed for over a year, living off my deployment pay." Sophia's expression hardened as she scrolled through the evidence. "When did you last authorize any major transactions?" "Never. We agreed the money was for my parents' retirement and our future down payment." I pulled out bank statements I'd printed that morning. "I've been sending $2,000 monthly to our joint account. He was supposed to be paying bills and saving the rest." "How much are we talking about?" "Approximately $45,000 over the past 18 months. The number hit me fresh each time I said it. Nearly 2 years of careful saving gone. Sophia made notes quickly. "You mentioned a fraud alert about a month ago. Something about signature verification and unauthorized access attempts. I was coordinating a major supply operation and didn't have time to investigate. I felt stupid admitting it, but deployment schedules were brutal. That's actually good news, she said, surprising me. It means the bank flagged suspicious activity. She picked up her phone. I'm calling Sergeant First Class Miguel Dominguez in financial crimes. He specializes in military spouse fraud cases. Within an hour, I was sitting with both Sophia and Miguel, a stocky man with kind eyes, who'd clearly seen too many soldiers betrayed by the people they trusted most. Mrs. Ramirez, this happens more than you'd think, Miguel said, his voice gentle but firm. Deployed service members are particularly vulnerable. The distance, the time zones, the trust we place in our families. It creates perfect conditions for financial abuse. He opened a thick folder. The good news is, you have strong legal protections. The Service Members Civil Relief Act, military banking regulations, and if he forged your signature, which seems likely, we're looking at federal wire fraud. What's the process? I asked, my logistics training kicking in. When facing a problem, I needed steps, procedures, timelines. First, we contact the bank to freeze all joint accounts. Then we trace every transaction. If he used forged documents or misrepresented your deployment status to bypass normal verification procedures, that's multiple felonies. Miguel's voice carried quiet satisfaction. Some people think military spouses are easy targets. They're about to learn otherwise. I felt something shift inside me, the first stirring of hope since seeing those photos. By that afternoon, I had a full financial investigation team working my case. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Clark, a forensic accountant with the military police, had pulled transaction records going back 2 years. The picture they painted was worse than I'd imagined. He's been bleeding your account dry for months, Jennifer said, pointing to a printout covered in red marks. Small amounts at first, $300 here, $500 there. Classic pattern of financial abuse. The victim doesn't notice until it's too late. I studied the highlighted withdrawals, restaurant charges at places I'd never heard of, online purchases for electronics, clothing, jewelry, cash advances that happened almost weekly. I thought he was just struggling with unemployment. I kept sending more money because I felt guilty being away. That's exactly what he was counting on, Miguel added. He'd returned with more documents, including copies of the house purchase paperwork. Here's where it gets interesting. To buy that house, he needed to show stable income and down payment funds. He did that by forging your signature on financial documents and claiming you were a willing co-purchaser. Sophia leaned forward. Show her the loan application. Miguel spread out several pages. There, in handwriting that almost looked like mine but wasn't, was my signature on mortgage documents. My supposed income was listed as my full military salary plus a fictional consulting business. My deployment was misrepresented as a temporary assignment, suggesting I'd be returning to Portland permanently within months. He told them you were deployed but actively participating in the purchase, Jennifer explained. Made it seem like you were shopping for houses via video calls and had given him power of attorney for the closing. I felt physically sick. Power of attorney, that doesn't exist. Correct, which makes every document he signed a forgery and every representation he made fraud. Miguel's tone was grimly satisfied. The girlfriend's involvement makes it worse. She signed documents claiming to know you personally and confirming your consent to the purchase. She's never met me. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, Sophia noted. They both knew the representations were false. Jennifer pulled out her laptop. I've already contacted the title company and the bank. The Service Members Civil Relief Act gives us significant leverage here. When they find out a deployed service member's signature was forged and their protected funds were misused, everything stops. What happens next? I asked, my mind racing ahead to potential outcomes. Tomorrow morning, investigators from the Office of Service Members Civil Relief will be waiting at the title company, Miguel said. Jason and his girlfriend are scheduled to complete the final closing paperwork at 10:00 a.m. Portland time. I looked at the photo of the house again. My dream home bought with my betrayed trust. Will I get the money back? Every penny, Sophia assured me. plus interest penalties and probably their legal fees. For the first time in days, I smiled. My husband thought he was so smart, but he'd just committed federal crimes with a paper trail that would make prosecutors' jobs easy. My phone buzzed with a message from my sister Elena. She'd been trying to reach me all day. Mom's doctor called. The surgery can't wait anymore. Call me as soon as you can. Just when I thought the day couldn't get any worse. That night, I sat alone in my quarters, the photo of the house on my phone screen. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how Jason and I had once sat on our porch in the early days of our marriage, dreaming about our future home. The wraparound porch. The big kitchen where I'd cook Sunday dinners. The yard where our kids would play. Kids who never came. A future that never happened. My phone buzzed again. It was Elena. Did you call? Mom's getting worse? The doctor says if we wait another month, the surgery might not help. We need to make a decision. I set the phone down without answering. I couldn't tell her that the money I'd promised, the money that was supposed to help with Mom's medical bills, was gone, that my husband had stolen it to buy a house with another woman. From my desk drawer, I took out our wedding photo. 10 years. 10 years of supporting his businesses that never quite took off. 10 years of deployments and separations and promises that things would get better. I didn't cry. Instead, I sat in the stillness of my room, snow falling silently outside my window, and looked at the man I thought I knew. Had there been signs? Had I been too busy, too focused on my career to notice he was changing? Or had he always been this person, and I'd been too in love to see it? In the photo, he was smiling, his arm around my waist, looking at me like I was the center of his universe. Where had that man gone, or had he ever existed at all? I thought about my mother growing weaker while waiting for a surgery we now couldn't afford. About the house I'd dreamed of now in the hands of strangers. About the future I'd planned now up in smoke. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there, wedding photo in one hand, phone with its betrayal in the other, feeling something hard and cold crystallize in my chest. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about everything that had been taken from me. And I was going to get it all back. The next morning found me pacing the communications room at 4:00 a.m., calculating time zones obsessively. It was 9:00 a.m. in Portland, 1 hour before Jason and Elise's scheduled closing. I'd barely slept, running through every possible scenario of what was about to unfold. My secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Miguel. Assets frozen, team in position, will update hourly. Sophia found me there, clutching a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. You know you don't have to watch this unfold in real time, she said gently. Yes, I do. I couldn't explain why, but I needed to be present for this moment, even from 5,000 miles away. He spent months planning this betrayal, sending me those photos to hurt me. I want to know the exact moment it all falls apart. She sat down beside me. Jennifer's team found more evidence overnight. Your husband's been living quite the lifestyle on your deployment pay. I looked up from my phone. What do you mean, miss? Credit cards you didn't know about opened in both your names using your social security number and forged signatures. He's been funding expensive dinners, weekend trips. Even bought the girlfriend a car. Sophia handed me a thick folder. Total debt in your name, $78,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $78,000. I'd been careful with money my entire adult life, building credit slowly, saving religiously. How was that even legal? It's not. Sophia answered my unspoken question. Identity theft? Fraud? Forgery? He's been busy. She pointed to specific charges. Look at the timeline. Most of these purchases happened right after you deployed, when he knew you'd be too busy to monitor accounts closely. I stared at charges for jewelry stores, luxury hotels, expensive restaurants. A $3,000 weekend at a resort in Napa Valley. $5,000 at a high-end clothing boutique. While I was eating MREs and sleeping in a barracks, he was living like a millionaire. My phone buzzed again. Subjects arrived early, investigators in conference room adjacent to closing office. They're there, I told Sophia, my heart racing. She squeezed my shoulder. Whatever happens next, remember that you're not the victim here anymore. You're the one who caught them. At exactly 10:15 a.m. Portland time, my phone rang. It was Miguel calling from Portland. Olivia, we got them. I put the call on speaker so Sophia could hear. What happened? They walked into the title company like they owned the world. Jason was actually bragging to the girlfriend about how easy it had been to access your money, said military wives were too trusting and stupid to notice anything. My hands clenched into fists. He said that in front of 2 investigators who recorded every word. Miguel sounded pleased. When the title company representative told them there was a problem with the signatures, Jason got belligerent. Started yelling about how his wife was deployed and couldn't be expected to come in person for every little detail. Then what? That's when Officer Janet Martinez from Service Member Civil Relief introduced herself. She explained that forging a deployed service member's signature on financial documents was a federal crime and that all assets related to the transaction were being frozen pending investigation. I could picture Jason's face, the arrogance melting into panic. How did he react? Denied everything at first, claimed you'd given him permission for all of it. Then the girlfriend started crying, saying she didn't know any of this was illegal. Miguel paused. But here's the best part. Martinez asked him to explain the power of attorney documentation, and he couldn't produce any legitimate paperwork because it doesn't exist. Exactly. That's when he realized how much trouble he was in, Miguel continued. The title company had to call their legal department immediately. Turns out when they ran the verification checks this morning, which they should have done weeks ago, half the documents didn't match their security protocols. What kind of documents? Sophia asked, taking notes. Employment verification letters claiming Olivia worked for a consulting firm in Portland. Bank statements showing joint income that didn't exist. Even a letter supposedly from Olivia's commanding officer giving her permission to purchase property while deployed. Miguel's voice carried professional disgust. All forged, all easily disproven. I felt a mix of vindication and fury. How sophisticated were the forgeries? Amateur hour. Jason's not nearly as smart as he thinks. He used an old letterhead template he probably downloaded online, and the supposed commanding officer's signature was just a Google image of a military signature. Any real verification would have caught it immediately. My phone buzzed with a text message and my blood went cold. It was from Jason. What the hell did you do? They're saying I committed fraud. This is your fault for not being here. I showed the message to Sophia, who shook her head. Even when caught red-handed, he's still blaming you. That's going to look great in court. Miguel was still talking. The girlfriend's involvement runs deeper than we initially thought. Elise wasn't just a passive participant. She actively helped forge documents. We found text messages between them planning how to make the fake paperwork look legitimate. She was in on it from the beginning. According to the message thread they recovered, she was the one who suggested using my deployment status to their advantage. Said military wives were easy targets because they couldn't monitor things closely. His voice hardened. She also bragged to friends about spending your money posting social media photos with captions like, "When your man knows how to provide." I remembered those photos, Elise in expensive restaurants wearing jewelry I couldn't afford, living the life I should have been building for my future. Social media evidence, screenshots of everything. She documented their entire fraud scheme thinking it made her look successful. Every expensive dinner, every shopping trip, every luxury purchase, all time-stamped and geotagged. Miguel sounded almost amused. Criminals who post their crimes online make our jobs much easier. Sophia was making rapid notes. What's the immediate fallout? All joint accounts frozen. The house sale is voided. The title company is facing their own legal issues for not properly verifying the documents, and both Jason and Elise are looking at federal charges. My phone buzzed again with another text from Jason. You ruined everything. Elise is crying and it's all your fault. I loved you, and this is how you repay me. I showed it to Sophia, who laughed darkly. He loved you so much he stole your money and bought a house with another woman. That's definitely going in the evidence file. Miguel continued. The U.S. Attorney's Office is very interested in this case. Military spouse fraud is a priority for them, especially when it involves forged documents and identity theft. They're looking at wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and violations of the Service Members Civil Relief Act. What kind of penalties are we talking about? I asked. Wire fraud alone carries up to 20 years. Add the identity theft and military protection violations, and they're both looking at serious federal prison time. He paused. Plus full restitution to you, including penalties and interest. I felt something I hadn't experienced since seeing those first photos. Genuine peace. When will they be arrested? Already happened. They're both in federal custody as of 30 minutes ago. 3 hours later, I was back in the communications room when Jennifer Clark called with updates that made everything even more shocking. Olivia, you need to hear this, Jennifer said, her voice carrying barely contained excitement. I put her on speaker. When we executed the search warrant on their apartment, we found evidence of a much bigger scheme. What kind of evidence? Jason's been doing this to other military spouses. We found files on 3 other women whose husbands are deployed, complete with forged documents and stolen financial information. She paused for effect. He wasn't just betraying you. He was running a military spouse fraud operation. Sophia's eyebrows shot up. Other victims, all logistics or supply officers like Olivia, all deployed to locations with challenging communication schedules. He specifically targeted women in positions where they'd be too busy to monitor accounts closely. Jennifer's tone turned grim. Elise helped him research the targets through social media, identifying spouses with good credit and steady military income. I felt sick thinking about other women going through what I'd experienced. How much money total? Preliminary estimate is over $230,000 across 4 victims, including you. But here's where it gets interesting, Jennifer continued. The girlfriend wasn't just his accomplice. She was the mastermind. That revelation hit me like a slap. Elise planned this. According to seized communications, she approached Jason after meeting him at a bar 6 months ago. She'd researched military spouse fraud techniques online and was looking for someone with access to deployed partners. Jennifer's voice carried professional disgust. She specifically targeted older, unemployed men married to successful military women. Sophia was furiously taking notes. So this was a premeditated identity theft operation. Gets better. Elise's real name is Elise Martin. She's been using multiple identities to run romance scams for years. The Instagram fitness coach persona was completely fake, designed to attract men like Jason, who were feeling insecure about their wife's success. I thought about those photos again, my husband grinning beside someone who'd manipulated him into destroying our marriage. Was any of their relationship real? Based on the evidence, she was planning to disappear once they'd stolen enough money to buy the house outright. The mortgage was just a temporary step. She intended to refinance or sell quickly, taking her share and moving on to the next target. My phone buzzed with yet another message from Jason. They're saying Elise is a criminal who used me. You have to help me. I made a mistake, but I didn't know she was lying about everything. I showed the message to Sophia, who rolled her eyes. Now he wants your help. Classic manipulation. Jennifer continued. The best part is that their arrest was recorded by the title company's security cameras. Jason completely lost it when he realized the scope of the charges. Started screaming that Elise had lied to him about everything, that he thought you'd given permission for the house purchase. Did he really believe that? I asked, suddenly wondering if Jason had been as much a victim as I was. Hard to say. The messages we recovered suggest he knew it was wrong but convinced himself he deserved your money because of your successful career. Jennifer's voice softened slightly. He also wrote several drafts of messages to you that he never sent. Apologies mixed with resentment about feeling like a failure compared to your military achievements. I felt an unexpected pang of sadness. Our marriage had problems, but I'd never imagined they'd lead to federal crime. What happens to the other victims? We're contacting them today. Thanks to your case, we can recover their money and prevent Elise from targeting anyone else. Jennifer paused. You probably saved several families from financial ruin. That thought gave me something I hadn't expected, purpose beyond just personal justice. But I still had one problem to solve. As I ended the call, I looked at Elena's messages about our mother's surgery. I needed to find a way to help her even with my savings gone. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. It was time to tell her everything that had happened and to find a solution together. As the call connected, I felt the weight of the past 48 hours pressing down on me. But beneath it, something else was growing. A quiet, steady strength I didn't know I possessed. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. My phone buzzed one more time. A final message from Jason. I don't know who I am without you. Please help me. But I knew exactly who I was. I'd always known. And I was done helping men who saw me as nothing more than a bank account and a convenience. It was time to help the person who needed it most, my mother. And after that, myself. I don't understand, Liv. How could he do this? Elena's voice cracked over the secure line. It was just after midnight in Munich, and I sat cross-legged on my narrow barracks bed, phone pressed to my ear. Outside, snow continued to fall in thick, silent waves. The base had gone quiet, except for the occasional rumble of trucks or distant voices of the night patrol. I've been asking myself the same question, I said, keeping my voice steady for her sake. But right now, we need to focus on Mom. The doctors say if we don't schedule the surgery within 2 weeks, the prognosis gets much worse. Elena's voice was thick with worry. We need $30,000, Liv. Insurance covers some, but not the specialist or the new procedure. The amount hung between us. $30,000 that I no longer had. I'm working on it, I promised. The legal team says I'll get restitution, but that could take months. Mom doesn't have months. I closed my eyes, fighting back a wave of helplessness. I know. Let me make some calls tomorrow. There are emergency assistance programs for military families. I'll figure something out. After we hung up, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother, the woman who'd raised 2 daughters alone after our father died, who'd worked double shifts to put us through college, who'd never once complained about the sacrifices she'd made. Now she needed me, and I couldn't help her because my husband had stolen our future. I pulled out my laptop and began researching military emergency assistance funds, making a list of options. By 3 a.m., I had 5 potential sources and had drafted applications for 3 of them. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. As dawn broke over the base, I headed to the mess hall, the lack of sleep burning behind my eyes. I'd barely touched my coffee when I felt someone slide into the seat across from me. You look like you've been up all night, said Lieutenant Rebecca Chen, setting down her tray. At 33, Becca was younger than me, but had quickly become my closest friend on base. Smart, perceptive, and refreshingly blunt, she ran the communications division with military precision and unmilitary language. That obvious? I asked. Only to someone who knows what sleep deprivation looks like on you. She pushed a plate of eggs toward me. Eat, then talk. I gave her the abbreviated version, Jason's betrayal, my mother's medical crisis, the mounting financial disaster. Jesus, Liv. She shook her head. When it rains, it pours. More like when it rains, someone steals your umbrella and then charges you for getting wet. I stabbed at my eggs. The worst part is I can't be there for any of it, not for Mom's surgery, not for the legal proceedings. I'm stuck here while my life falls apart 5,000 miles away. Becca was quiet for a moment, tapping her fork against her plate. What if you weren't stuck here? What do you mean? Emergency family leave, medical hardship. Between your mother's condition and the federal case involving your finances, you might qualify for temporary stateside reassignment. I stared at her. The possibility hadn't even occurred to me. Captain Harris in personnel owes me a favor, she continued. Let me talk to him. No promises, but it's worth a shot. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. I don't know how to thank you. Becca waved away my gratitude. Just bring me back some decent coffee from the States. The stuff here could strip paint. By mid-morning, I was back in Sophia's office reviewing new developments in the case. She'd spread documents across her desk, creating a timeline of Jason and Elise's activities. We've identified at least 3 additional victims, she said, pointing to a map where red pins marked military bases. All women with deployed spouses, all with substantial savings that were systematically drained. The pattern is always the same. They target couples where one spouse is deployed to a remote location with limited communication, then the civilian spouse is approached by Elise through social media or local venues. And Jason? I asked. How did he fit into all this? Sophia handed me a thick folder. Based on the evidence we've gathered, this wasn't his first rodeo. We found records going back 3 years, credit card applications, loan documents, all with forged signatures. I opened the folder and froze. The first document was a loan application dated just 6 months after our wedding. The signature wasn't mine, but it was a decent attempt. He's been doing this since the beginning. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. It looks that way, Sophia said gently. The amounts were smaller at first. A credit card here, a personal loan there. Nothing that would raise red flags. I flipped through the documents, a decade of betrayal laid out in bureaucratic black and white. Why didn't I see it? Because he was careful, Sophia said. And because you trusted him. That's what marriage is supposed to be, trust. A sick feeling grew in my stomach as I reached a document from 5 years ago, mortgage refinancing papers for our first home, the small bungalow we'd bought when I was stationed in Colorado. According to these papers, we'd taken out $50,000 in equity. I never agreed to this, I said, pointing at the document. We sold that house because Jason said the market was too volatile, that we needed to rent for a while until things stabilized. Sophia made a note. So the pattern started early. He'd create financial problems through fraud, then convince you the solution was his idea. I thought back to that time, how stressed Jason had been about money, how relieved when we sold the house. I'd been preparing for my first overseas deployment, too preoccupied to question his financial decisions. He never seemed to spend extravagantly, I said, still trying to make sense of it. Where did all the money go? Sophia pulled out another file. Gambling mostly. Online poker, sports betting. We found accounts in his name on 12 different platforms. He was good at hiding its separate email addresses, prepaid cards, the works. The revelation was like a punch to the gut. All those years I'd been working extra shifts, taking hazardous duty assignments for the bonus pay, pinching pennies to build our future, and he'd been gambling it away behind my back. There's more, Sophia said, her voice softer now. We found these in a locked drawer in his desk. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were letters, dozens of them addressed to me, but never sent. Some dated back years, others just months old. I pulled one out at random, dated 2 years ago. Liv, I messed up again. The startup investment I told you about last month wasn't real. I lost the money gambling. I don't know how to tell you this in person, how to face the disappointment in your eyes. You work so hard, sacrifice so much, and I just keep failing you. I promise I'll get help this time. I'll go to meetings, see a therapist, whatever it takes. I'll find a real job. I'll be the man you deserve. I love you more than you'll ever know. I'm sorry. J. I read letter after letter, each one a variation on the same theme: confession, contrition, promises to change. None of them ever sent. Instead of facing me, instead of getting help, he'd chosen to dig himself deeper, to live a double life, and eventually to steal from me and others. It doesn't excuse anything he did, Sophia said, watching me read, but it might help explain it. He was ashamed, I said quietly. Too ashamed to ask for help, so he kept making it worse. Classic pattern with gambling addiction, Sophia agreed. The shame feeds the addiction, which increases the shame. I put the letters back in the envelope, feeling hollowed out. The man I'd married, the man I'd shared my life with for a decade, had been a stranger all along. What happens now? I asked. Both Jason and Elise have been formally charged. The prosecutor is pushing for the maximum penalties given the targeting of military families. And the house, my money. The house sale has been voided. Your funds will be returned from escrow, but it could take a few weeks to process. She hesitated. There's one more thing you should know. Jason's asking to speak with you. I stiffened. Why would I want to talk to him? You don't have to, Sophia assured me. But his lawyer is suggesting that he might be willing to provide information about other potential victims in exchange for a reduced sentence. And he wants me to vouch for him, tell them he's really a good guy who got manipulated. Something like that. Sophia's expression was carefully neutral. It's your decision, Olivia. You don't owe him anything. I thought about the letters about the years of lies. I need time to think about it. Back in my quarters, I sat on the edge of my bed, overwhelmed by everything I'd learned. The Jason I thought I knew, the creative, passionate man who'd swept me off my feet, who'd supported my military career, who'd talked about building a life together, had never really existed. Instead, there was this other Jason, a man consumed by addiction and shame, who'd stolen from me and others to feed his habit. I pulled out our wedding photo again, studying his face. Had there been signs even then? A flicker of something in his eyes that I'd missed or ignored. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Becca. Good news, she said without preamble. Captain Harris thinks we can make a case for temporary reassignment. Humanitarian reasons. He needs documentation of your mother's medical condition and confirmation of your involvement in the federal case. I can get those, I said, relief washing over me. How long would the reassignment be? 30 days initially with the possibility of extension. You'd be stationed at Fort Lewis, which puts you close to Portland and your family. I stared at her. The possibility hadn't even occurred to me. Captain Harrison personnel owes me a favor, she continued. Let me talk to him. No promises, but it's worth a shot. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. I don't know how to thank you. Becca waved away my gratitude. Just bring me back some decent coffee from the States. The stuff here could strip paint. By mid-morning, I was back in Sophia's office reviewing new developments in the case. She'd spread documents across her desk, creating a timeline of Jason and Elise's activities. We've identified at least 3 additional victims, she said, pointing to a map where red pins marked military bases. All women with deployed spouses, all with substantial savings that were systematically drained. The pattern is always the same. They target couples where one spouse is deployed to a remote location with limited communication, then the civilian spouse is approached by Elise through social media or local venues. And Jason, I asked, how did he fit into all this? Sophia handed me a thick folder. Based on the evidence we've gathered, this wasn't his first rodeo. We found records going back 3 years, credit card applications, loan documents, all with forged signatures. I opened the folder and froze. The first document was a loan application dated just 6 months after our wedding. The signature wasn't mine, but it was a decent attempt. He's been doing this since the beginning. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. It looks that way, Sophia said gently. The amounts were smaller at first. A credit card here, a personal loan there. Nothing that would raise red flags. I flipped through the documents, a decade of betrayal laid out in bureaucratic black and white. Why didn't I see it? Because he was careful, Sophia said. And because you trusted him. That's what marriage is supposed to be, trust. A sick feeling grew in my stomach as I reached a document from 5 years ago, mortgage refinancing papers for our first home, the small bungalow we'd bought when I was stationed in Colorado. According to these papers, we'd taken out $50,000 in equity. I never agreed to this, I said, pointing at the document. We sold that house because Jason said the market was too volatile, that we needed to rent for a while until things stabilized. Sophia made a note. So the pattern started early. He'd create financial problems through fraud, then convince you the solution was his idea. I thought back to that time, how stressed Jason had been about money, how relieved when we sold the house. I'd been preparing for my first overseas deployment, too preoccupied to question his financial decisions. He never seemed to spend extravagantly, I said, still trying to make sense of it. Where did all the money go? Sophia pulled out another file. Gambling mostly. Online poker, sports betting. We found accounts in his name on 12 different platforms. He was good at hiding at separate email addresses, prepaid cards, the works. The revelation was like a punch to the gut. All those years I'd been working extra shifts, taking hazardous duty assignments for the bonus pay, pinching pennies to build our future, and he'd been gambling it away behind my back. There's more, Sophia said, her voice softer now. We found these in a locked drawer in his desk. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were letters, dozens of them addressed to me but never sent. Some dated back years, others just months old. I pulled one out at random, dated 2 years ago. Liv, I messed up again. The startup investment I told you about last month wasn't real. I lost the money gambling. I don't know how to tell you this in person, how to face the disappointment in your eyes. You work so hard, sacrifice so much, and I just keep failing you. I promise I'll get help this time. I'll go to meetings, see a therapist, whatever it takes. I'll find a real job. I'll be the man you deserve. I love you more than you'll ever know. I'm sorry. J. I read letter after letter, each one a variation on the same theme: confession, contrition, promises to change. None of them ever sent. Instead of facing me, instead of getting help, he'd chosen to dig himself deeper, to live a double life, and eventually to steal from me and others. It doesn't excuse anything he did, Sophia said, watching me read. But it might help explain it. He was ashamed, I said quietly. Too ashamed to ask for help, so he kept making it worse. Classic pattern with gambling addiction, Sophia agreed. The shame feeds the addiction, which increases the shame. I put the letters back in the envelope, feeling hollowed out. The man I'd married, the man I'd shared my life with for a decade, had been a stranger all along. What happens now? I asked. Both Jason and Elise have been formally charged. The prosecutor is pushing for the maximum penalties given the targeting of military families. And the house, my money. The house sale has been voided. Your funds will be returned from escrow, but it could take a few weeks to process. She hesitated. There's one more thing you should know. Jason's asking to speak with you. I stiffened. Why would I want to talk to him? You don't have to, Sophia assured me. But his lawyer is suggesting that he might be willing to provide information about other potential victims in exchange for a reduced sentence. And he wants me to vouch for him. Tell them he's really a good guy who got manipulated. Something like that. Sophia's expression was carefully neutral. It's your decision, Olivia. You don't owe him anything. I thought about the letters, about the years of lies. I need time to think about it. Back in my quarters, I sat on the edge of my bed, overwhelmed by everything I'd learned. The Jason I thought I knew, the creative, passionate man who'd swept me off my feet, who'd supported my military career, who'd talked about building a life together, had never really existed. Instead, there was this other Jason, a man consumed by addiction and shame, who'd stolen from me and others to feed his habit. I pulled out our wedding photo again, studying his face. Had there been signs even then? A flicker of something in his eyes that I'd missed or ignored? My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Becca. Good news, she said without preamble. Captain Harris thinks we can make a case for temporary reassignment, humanitarian reasons. He needs documentation of your mother's medical condition and confirmation of your involvement in the federal case. I can get those, I said, relief washing over me. How long would the reassignment be? 30 days initially, with the possibility of extension. You'd be stationed at Fort Lewis, which puts you close to Portland and your family. I stared at her. The possibility hadn't even occurred to me. Captain Harris in personnel owes me a favor, she continued. Let me talk to him. No promises, but it's worth a shot. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. I don't know how to thank you. Becca waved away my gratitude. Just bring me back some decent coffee from the States. The stuff here could strip paint. By mid-morning, I was back in Sophia's office reviewing new developments in the case. She'd spread documents across her desk, creating a timeline of Jason and Elise's activities. "We've identified at least 3 additional victims," she said, pointing to a map where red pins marked military bases. "All women with deployed spouses, all with substantial savings that were systematically drained. The pattern is always the same. They target couples where one spouse is deployed to a remote location with limited communication. Then the civilian spouse is approached by Elise through social media or local venues." "And Jason?" I asked. "How did he fit into all this?" Sophia handed me a thick folder. "Based on the evidence we've gathered, this wasn't his first rodeo. We found records going back 3 years, credit card applications, loan documents, all with forged signatures." I opened the folder and froze. The first document was a loan application dated just 6 months after our wedding. The signature wasn't mine, but it was a decent attempt. "He's been doing this since the beginning." My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "It looks that way," Sophia said gently. "The amounts were smaller at first. A credit card here, a personal loan there. Nothing that would raise red flags." I flipped through the documents, a decade of betrayal laid out in bureaucratic black and white. "Why didn't I see it?" "Because he was careful," Sophia said. "And because you trusted him. That's what marriage is supposed to be, trust." A sick feeling grew in my stomach as I reached a document from 5 years ago. Mortgage refinancing papers for our first home, the small bungalow we'd bought when I was stationed in Colorado. According to these papers, we'd taken out $50,000 in equity. "I never agreed to this," I said, pointing at the document. "We sold that house because Jason said the market was too volatile, that we needed to rent for a while until things stabilized." Sophia made a note. "So the pattern started early. He'd create financial problems through fraud, then convince you the solution was his idea." I thought back to that time, how stressed Jason had been about money, how relieved when we sold the house. I'd been preparing for my first overseas deployment, too preoccupied to question his financial decisions. "He never seemed to spend extravagantly," I said, still trying to make sense of it. "Where did all the money go?" Sophia pulled out another file. "Gambling mostly, online poker, sports betting. We found accounts in his name on 12 different platforms. He was good at hiding at separate email addresses, prepaid cards, the works." The revelation was like a punch to the gut. All those years I'd been working extra shifts, taking hazardous duty assignments for the bonus pay, pinching pennies to build our future, and he'd been gambling it away behind my back. "There's more," Sophia said, her voice softer now. "We found these in a locked drawer in his desk." She slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were letters, dozens of them, addressed to me but never sent. Some dated back years, others just months old. I pulled one out at random, dated 2 years ago. "Liv, I messed up again. The startup investment I told you about last month wasn't real. I lost the money gambling. I don't know how to tell you this in person, how to face the disappointment in your eyes. You work so hard, sacrifice so much, and I just keep failing you. I promise I'll get help this time. I'll go to meetings, see a therapist, whatever it takes. I'll find a real job. I'll be the man you deserve. I love you more than you'll ever know. I'm sorry. J." I read letter after letter, each one a variation on the same theme: confession, contrition, promises to change. None of them ever sent. Instead of facing me, instead of getting help, he'd chosen to dig himself deeper, to live a double life, and eventually to steal from me and others. "It doesn't excuse anything he did," Sophia said, watching me read. "But it might help explain it." "He was ashamed," I said quietly. "Too ashamed to ask for help, so he kept making it worse." "Classic pattern with gambling addiction," Sophia agreed. "The shame feeds the addiction, which increases the shame." I put the letters back in the envelope, feeling hollowed out. The man I'd married, the man I'd shared my life with for a decade, had been a stranger all along. "What happens now?" I asked. "Both Jason and Elise have been formally charged. The prosecutor is pushing for the maximum penalties given the targeting of military families. And the house, my money. The house sale has been voided. Your funds will be returned from escrow, but it could take a few weeks to process. She hesitated. There's one more thing you should know. Jason's asking to speak with you. I stiffened. Why would I want to talk to him? You don't have to, Sophia assured me. But his lawyer is suggesting that he might be willing to provide information about other potential victims in exchange for a reduced sentence. And he wants me to vouch for him. Tell them he's really a good guy who got manipulated. Something like that. Sophia's expression was carefully neutral. It's your decision, Olivia. You don't owe him anything. I thought about the letters, about the years of lies. I need time to think about it. Back in my quarters, I sat on the edge of my bed, overwhelmed by everything I'd learned. The Jason I thought I knew, the creative, passionate man who'd swept me off my feet, who'd supported my military career, who'd talked about building a life together, had never really existed. Instead, there was this other Jason, a man consumed by addiction and shame, who'd stolen from me and others to feed his habit. I pulled out our wedding photo again, studying his face. Had there been signs even then? A flicker of something in his eyes that I'd missed or ignored. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Becca. Good news, she said without preamble. Captain Harris thinks we can make a case for temporary reassignment. Humanitarian reasons. He needs documentation of your mother's medical condition and confirmation of your involvement in the federal case. I can get those, I said, relief washing over me. How long would the reassignment be? 30 days initially, with the possibility of extension. You'd be stationed at Fort Lewis, which puts you close to Portland and your family. Becca? I don't know how to thank you. Becca waved away my gratitude. Just bring me back some decent coffee from the States. The stuff here could strip paint. By mid-morning, I was back in Sophia's office reviewing new developments in the case. She'd spread documents across her desk, creating a timeline of Jason and Elise's activities. We've identified at least 3 additional victims, she said, pointing to a map where red pins marked military bases. The day of my mother's surgery dawned clear and cold, a rare winter morning in the Pacific Northwest without rain. I stood at the hospital window watching the sunrise paint Mount Hood in shades of pink and gold, trying to calm my racing mind. It had been 2 weeks since I'd returned stateside, 2 weeks of legal meetings, financial untangling, and preparation for today. The emergency funds had come through partly from the military assistance programs I'd applied for, partly from the anonymous donation that I still wasn't sure had come from Jason. The $45,000 from our joint account had been returned, the fraudulent credit cards closed, and the debt collectors informed of the identity theft. On paper, my financial life was being restored. My emotional life was another matter entirely. Coffee. Elena appeared beside me holding 2 steaming cups. It's hospital cafeteria sludge, but it's hot. I accepted the cup gratefully. Any word from Dr. Patel? They just took Mom back. The procedure should take about 4 hours. She leaned against the window frame, studying me over the rim of her cup. You look tired, Liv. I'm fine. Liar. Her tone was gentle. You don't have to be the strong one all the time, you know. I sipped my coffee, avoiding her gaze. Yes, I do. That's who I am, who I've always been. And look where that got you. As soon as the words left her mouth, Elena winced. I'm sorry. That was unfair. No, it wasn't. I sighed, turning back to the window. You're right. I spent 10 years being the strong one, handling everything, making sure our life ran smoothly, while he gambled away our future. That's not what I meant, Elena said. I meant you don't have to be strong with me. Not today. Not when Mom's in surgery, and your life is in pieces, and you haven't slept properly in weeks. The kindness in her voice nearly undid me. I blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. If I start falling apart now, I'm not sure I'll be able to stop. Elena took the coffee cup from my hands and set it on a nearby table. Then she pulled me into a hug, tight and fierce. So fall apart. I'll be here to pick up the pieces. And just like that, the dam broke. I cried for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, sobbing into my sister's shoulder while she held me rocking slightly like she used to when we were children, and I'd scraped a knee or lost a pet. When the tears finally subsided, I felt emptied out, but somehow lighter, as if a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged had been lifted. "Feel better?" Elena asked, handing me a tissue. I nodded, wiping my eyes. "A little, thanks. That's what sisters are for." She picked up our abandoned coffees. "Now drink this before it gets cold. We've got a long wait ahead of us." We settled into the surgical waiting room, a space designed to be soothing, but that only managed to be bland. Pale blue walls, uncomfortable chairs, outdated magazines, the universal language of hospitals everywhere. Elena flipped through a home decorating magazine, occasionally showing me a particularly hideous design choice that made us both laugh. I tried to focus on a novel I'd brought, but my mind kept wandering to the operating room, where my mother's life hung in the balance, to the jail cell, where my husband awaited trial, to the uncertain future stretching before me. "Have you decided what you're going to do?" Elena asked, as if reading my thoughts. "After all this, I mean." I closed my book, giving up the pretense of reading. "I don't know. Go back to Germany, I guess. My temporary assignment ends in 2 weeks. "Is that what you want?" I considered the question. Was it what I wanted? I'd always loved my career, taken pride in my service. But now the thought of returning to Munich, to the base where I'd received Jason's cruel message, to the life that had been built on a foundation of lies, it held no appeal. "I don't know what I want anymore," I admitted. For so long it was all about building a future with Jason. Now that future's gone, and I'm not sure what's left. "Everything's left," Elena said firmly. "You're only 37, Liv. You have your whole life ahead of you. A life I never planned for. Maybe that's a good thing." She set down her magazine. "Maybe it's time to figure out what you want, not what works around Jason's needs, or the army's demands, or even Mom's expectations." I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in years. At 42, Elena had never married, had built her life around her teaching career and her community work. She'd always seemed content with her choices, while I had rushed into marriage at 27, eager to start the conventional life I thought I wanted. "When did you get so wise?" I asked. She smiled. "Somewhere between my second divorce and my first gray hair. Life has a way of teaching you what matters." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Sophia. "Olivia, good news. The prosecutor has secured a plea deal from Jason. He's agreed to provide detailed testimony against Elise and her network in exchange for a reduced sentence." "How reduced?" I asked, moving to a quieter corner of the waiting room. "Instead of 7 to 10 years, he's looking at 3 to 5 with the possibility of parole after serving half his sentence." I absorbed this information, surprised at my lack of emotion. 3 to 5 years. Jason would still be a relatively young man when he got out, with most of his life ahead of him, unlike the other victims whose financial futures might be permanently damaged. "Is that fair? After what he did to me, to the others?" Sophia's voice was measured. "The information he's providing is valuable, Olivia. It could help us recover funds for dozens of victims across multiple states, and he's still facing significant time plus restitution." "What about Elise?" "She's not cooperating. With Jason's testimony and the evidence from the storage unit he told us about, she's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum." The storage unit lead had panned out. Inside, they'd found jewelry, electronics, and detailed records of over 30 victims spanning 5 years. It was a goldmine for the prosecution and a vindication of Jason's claim that he had valuable information to share. "There's one more thing," Sophia continued. "I checked county records about that property Jason mentioned. It's real, Olivia. 5 acres outside Hood River, deeded solely in your name. No liens, no mortgages, fully paid for." I sat down heavily, the news hitting me like a physical blow. He wasn't lying about that. No. It was purchased 6 months ago with funds from an inheritance account in his name. The deed transfer was properly filed. It's legally yours regardless of what happens with the criminal case or your divorce. I thanked her and hung up, my mind reeling. Jason had told the truth about the land, just as he'd apparently told the truth about the storage unit and the banker in Seattle, who was now also under investigation. It didn't erase his betrayal, but it complicated my understanding of it. When I returned to Elena, she took one look at my face and asked, "What happened?" I explained about the plea deal, the reduced sentence, the land in Hood River. "I don't know how to feel about any of it," I finished. "You don't have to decide right now," she said sensibly. "One crisis at a time." We lapsed into silence, the minutes ticking by with excruciating slowness. I found myself thinking about the land, 5 acres with a view of the mountain. Had Jason really bought it for me, a 10th anniversary gift, purchased with the one money he'd never gambled with? Or was it just another manipulation, a way to ensure I'd think kindly of him when he needed my support? My thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Patel, still in his surgical scrubs, his face tired but smiling. "The surgery went well," he said as we both jumped to our feet. "We were able to remove the entire tumor, and early indicators suggest it hadn't spread to surrounding tissue." Relief washed over me, so powerful I had to grip Elena's arm for support. "So she's going to be okay?" "Barring complications, yes. She'll need to stay in the hospital for a few days, and there will be follow-up treatments, but the prognosis is good." We thanked him profusely, asked about recovery times and next steps, and then were told we could see our mother in about an hour once she was settled in recovery. As soon as Dr. Patel left, Elena and I hugged each other tightly, both crying with relief. One crisis successfully navigated. Now for the rest. The following Tuesday, I sat in a courtroom in downtown Portland, watching as Jason was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked thinner than when I'd seen him at the jail, his shoulders hunched, his usual confidence nowhere in evidence. When he spotted me in the gallery, his eyes widened in surprise, then filled with a complex mix of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. I kept my expression neutral, determined not to give him the satisfaction of seeing how much his betrayal still hurt. The hearing was brief. Jason formally accepted the plea agreement, admitting to multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The judge set his sentencing for the following month and remanded him back to custody. As he was being led out, Jason turned and looked directly at me. He mouthed what looked like, "I'm sorry," before the bailiff ushered him through the side door. I remained seated as the courtroom emptied, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Jason Hayes, my husband of 10 years, was now a convicted felon. He would spend the next several years in federal prison, and I would move on, somehow. Sophia found me still sitting there, staring at the empty defendant's table. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." She sat beside me. "The prosecutor wanted me to tell you, with Jason's cooperation, they've already identified 15 more victims. Recovery efforts are underway." "That's something, at least." "It's more than something, Olivia. It's justice. Not just for you, but for all of them." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "Have you thought about what you're going to do next?" Sophia asked gently. "Everyone keeps asking me that," I said with a faint smile. "The truth is, I don't know. My temporary assignment ends next week. My mother's recovering well. The divorce papers are filed." "What do you want to do?" The question echoed Elena's from the hospital waiting room. What did I want? For so long, my wants had been subsumed by duty to my country, to my marriage, to my family. I'd never really asked myself what I wanted just for me. "I think I need some time," I said slowly. "Time to figure out who I am without Jason, without the structure of deployment." Sophia nodded. "That sounds wise. You've been through a trauma, Olivia. Recovery takes time." "I've been thinking about that land in Hood River," I admitted. "I haven't gone to see it yet." "Maybe you should," she suggested. "Regardless of how it came to you, it's yours now. A fresh start." A fresh start. The idea held more appeal than I wanted to admit. As we walked out of the courthouse together, Sophia handed me a business card. "This is Claire Donovan's number. She asked me to give it to you," said something about a support group for military spouses who've been victims of financial fraud. I took the card, touched by the gesture. "Tell her I'll call." "And this?" Sophia handed me another card. "This one, plain white with just a name and number, is for Dr. Lena Garcia. She's a therapist who specializes in working with military personnel dealing with trauma and betrayal." I hesitated before taking the second card. "I'm not sure I need—" "Just take it," Sophia said firmly. "You don't have to call, but having options is never a bad thing." I slipped both cards into my pocket. "Thank you. For everything." She squeezed my arm. "You're welcome. And Olivia, for what it's worth, I think you're going to be just fine." As I walked to my car, I found myself believing her, at least a little. A week later, I stood on 5 acres of land outside Hood River, watching the morning mist lift off the Columbia River Gorge. The property was even more beautiful than I had imagined, a gentle slope with old-growth Douglas firs along the perimeter, a small stream cutting through one corner, and a clear view of Mount Hood rising majestically in the distance. It was early March, and the first signs of spring were appearing, crocuses pushing through the damp earth buds, forming on the vine maples, birdsong filling the air. A season of renewal, of beginning again. I'd driven out here on a whim, the deed and key to the property burning a hole in my pocket. I hadn't planned to come, had almost convinced myself to sell the land unseen, to rid myself of this last connection to Jason. But something had drawn me here, a need to see this place that was now mine, whether I wanted it or not. Walking the property, I found a small clearing that would be perfect for a house. The house Jason and I had talked about building someday, with that wraparound porch and big windows to take in the view. The house that would now never be ours, but could still perhaps be mine. I sat on a fallen log listening to the stream's gentle murmur, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to think about the future. Not the future I'd planned with Jason, but a new future, one I would shape myself. My phone rang, breaking the stillness. It was Elena. "Where are you?" she asked. "I stopped by Mom's and she said you'd gone for a drive." "I'm in Hood River," I said, looking at the land. "Oh." A pause. "How is it?" "Beautiful," I admitted. "Peaceful." "Are you going to keep it?" I looked out over the property, imagining what it could become. "I think so. It feels right somehow." "Good," Elena said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Mom and I were talking about that actually. She thinks you should build that house you always wanted. On my own." The idea was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. "Why not?" "You've managed supply chains across 3 countries. I'm pretty sure you can handle a building project." She had a point. "Maybe I will." Anyway, the reason I called, Mom got the pathology report back. The tumor was benign, no further treatment needed beyond some follow-up appointments. Relief flooded through me. "That's wonderful news." "It is," Elena agreed. "So when are you coming back? Your flight to Germany is tomorrow, right?" I hesitated, looking again at the land, at the mountains, at the new life it represented. "I'm not sure I'm going back." "To Mom's?" "To Germany. To the army." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "That's a big decision, Liv." "I know. I've been thinking about it for a while. My 20 years are up next month. I could retire, take my pension." "Is that what you want?" There was that question again. What did I want? Looking out over the property at the space where my house could stand, I found I finally had an answer. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I want to build something of my own on my own terms. I want to be close to you and Mom. I want to plant a garden and watch it grow." "Then do it," Elena said simply. "The army's had enough of your life. It's time for you to live it for yourself." When we hung up, I stayed on the log for a long time, watching the light change across the valley as morning stretched toward noon. 20 years in uniform, 10 years of marriage, both ending within a month of each other. It should have felt like my life was falling apart, but instead it felt like it was finally coming together. I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls. The first to my commanding officer at Fort Lewis requesting retirement paperwork. The second to Claire Donovan accepting her invitation to join the support group. As I walked back to my car, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Jason, not at myself, not even at Elise. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a clear-eyed understanding of what had happened and why. Jason's gambling addiction, his shame, his desperation. Elise's calculated exploitation of vulnerable people, my own blindness to the signs, my willingness to believe the convenient lies. We had all played our parts in this tragedy. Now it was time for a new story. 2 weeks later, I sat in a circle of women in the community room of a church in Portland. Claire had introduced me to the group, all military spouses who had been victims of financial fraud, all at different stages of recovery. Some were still raw with anger, others had found a measure of peace. All were remarkably resilient. The hardest part for me, said a woman named Diane, was admitting that I'd been fooled. I'm a CPA, for God's sake, I should have known better. Murmurs of agreement circled the room. We all felt that way, that we should have known, should have seen the signs, should have protected ourselves better. That's what they count on, Claire said. Our shame, our reluctance to admit we've been victimized. It's how they keep us isolated, keep us from comparing notes. My husband forged my signature for 3 years before I caught him, said another woman, Susan. 3 years. And when I finally confronted him, he made me feel like I was overreacting, like it was my fault for being deployed and leaving him to handle everything. I nodded, remembering Jason's text. This is your fault for not being here. They gaslight us, Claire agreed. Make us doubt our own experiences, our own feelings. My mother always said you can't build a life with someone who lies to you, I found myself saying. I didn't understand what she meant until now. The other women looked at me, some nodding in recognition of the truth in those words. What are you going to do now? Susan asked. Are you staying in the military? No, I said, the decision feeling more right each time I voiced it. I'm retiring next month, building a house on some land I own, starting over. That takes courage, Diane said admiringly. Starting over. I hadn't thought of it as courage. Necessity, perhaps. Survival. But as I looked around the circle at these women who had all been betrayed in similar ways, who were all finding their own paths forward, I realized that yes, it did take courage. Not the dramatic courage of battlefield heroics, but the quiet courage of getting up each day and rebuilding a life from the ashes of betrayal. After the meeting, Claire and I went for coffee at a nearby cafe. We'd developed a friendship over the past weeks, bonded by our shared experience and mutual respect. Ryan's moving back in next week, she told me, stirring her latte. We've been in counseling for months. It's not perfect, but we're working on it. I'm glad, I said, meaning it. Not everyone gets a second chance. No, she agreed. And not everyone should. But Ryan was a victim too in his way. He made mistakes, but he didn't set out to defraud me. I thought of Jason, of his gambling addiction, of the unsent letters full of shame and remorse. Had he been a victim too? Of his own weakness, of Elise's manipulation? Perhaps. But he had still made choices. Choices that hurt me and others. Have you heard from Jason? Claire asked, as if reading my thoughts. He writes, I admitted. I haven't answered. Do you think you ever will? I considered the question. I don't know. Maybe someday, when it doesn't hurt so much. When I've found my footing again. She nodded, understanding. No rush, you've got time. Time. It was a gift I hadn't expected. Time to heal, time to rebuild, time to discover who I was outside of my roles as wife and officer. As we finished our coffee, Claire mentioned that her husband was starting a veteran-focused construction company. If you're serious about building that house, Ryan could probably give you some advice, maybe even a good deal on the work. I thanked her, adding Ryan's number to my growing list of resources. In the weeks since returning from Germany, I'd accumulated a network of support. I never would have imagined Sophia and Miguel from JAG, the women from the support group, my mother and sister, even Becca, who called regularly from Munich to check on me. I wasn't alone. That was the revelation that had slowly dawned on me. Despite Jason's betrayal, despite the collapse of the future I'd planned, I wasn't alone. That night back at my mother's house, I sat on the porch swing watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Mom was inside dozing in her recliner, her recovery progressing steadily. Elena had gone home after dinner, but not before helping me sort through more of Jason's belongings from our apartment. It was a painful process, this dismantling of a shared life. Each object held memories, some good, some now tainted by the knowledge of his deception. The coffee mug I'd bought him in Italy, the sweater he wore on our last anniversary, the photo albums filled with smiling versions of ourselves from happier times. I was keeping very little, just a few mementos that still held meaning for me. The rest would be donated or stored until Jason's release. It felt like the right thing to do, neither vindictive nor sentimental. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Garcia, confirming our appointment for the following day. After much hesitation, I'd finally called the therapist Sophia had recommended, recognizing that I needed help processing everything that had happened. It wasn't a sign of weakness, I'd realized, to ask for help. It was a sign of strength, the strength to acknowledge my own vulnerability, to admit that some burdens were too heavy to carry alone. As I responded to the text, I noticed an email notification from my retirement officer. My paperwork had been processed. Effective April 15th. I would be officially retired from the United States Army after 20 years of service. 20 years. From a young recruit seeking direction to a major with commendations and leadership experience. The Army had given me structure, purpose, a sense of belonging. It had also demanded sacrifices, time away from family, missed holidays, the strain it had put on my marriage. But that chapter was closing now. A new one was beginning. I opened my notebook where I'd been sketching ideas for the house in Hood River. It was taking shape in my mind, not the grand showcase home Jason and I had once dreamed of, but something smaller, more practical. A home designed for one person, but with room for visitors. A home that would reflect my tastes, my needs, my life as it was now. Tomorrow, I'd meet with an architect recommended by Ryan. The week after, I'd visit the property with a contractor to discuss site preparation. By summer, construction could begin. By Christmas, perhaps I'd be in my new home. The future was coming into focus, not as a vague someday, but as a series of concrete steps, plans, decisions. My plans, my decisions. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I was charting my own course, answering to no one but myself. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was exactly what I needed. My phone rang, an unknown number. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Mrs. Ramirez," a male voice asked. "This is Thomas Lloyd, Jason's attorney." I tensed. "Yes. I'm sorry to bother you so late, but I thought you should know Jason's sentencing hearing has been moved up. It's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Why the change? The judge had a scheduling conflict. But also," he hesitated, "Jason asked me to tell you he'd like you to be there if you're willing. He has something he wants to say to the court and to you." My first instinct was to refuse. I'd attended the plea hearing out of a sense of obligation, of needing to see justice done. But the sentencing, that felt different, more personal somehow. "You don't have to decide now," Lloyd said, sensing my hesitation. "Just know that the option is there." After we hung up, I sat for a long time watching the stars and thinking about choices. Jason's choices that had led him to prison, my choices that were leading me toward a new life, and the choice now before me to attend the sentencing or not. Would it provide the closure I was seeking, or would it just reopen wounds that were finally beginning to heal? I didn't have an answer yet. But for the first time in months, I felt a sense of calm as I contemplated the decision. Whatever I chose, it would be my choice, made from a place of growing strength rather than reactive emotion. In the morning, I would wake up, have breakfast with my mother, attend my therapy appointment, and then decide whether to go to the courthouse. One step at a time, one day at a time, rebuilding my life from the ground up. The future stretched before me, no longer a void of uncertainty, but a canvas of possibility. And I was finally ready to begin painting it in colors of my own choosing. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected, filled with journalists, legal observers, and what appeared to be other victims and their families. I slipped into a seat in the back row, not wanting to draw attention. Jason sat at the defense table, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by his circumstances. His lawyer leaned over, whispering something in his ear, and Jason nodded without looking up. At the prosecution table, Sophia caught my eye and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Beside her sat a woman I recognized as FBI agent Diana Foster, surrounded by stacks of documents, the evidence of Jason and Elise's crimes laid out in bureaucratic detail. The judge entered, and we all rose. Judge Helen Watkins was a stern-looking woman in her 60s, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She called the court to order and began with the formalities of the sentencing hearing. The prosecutor spoke first, outlining the scope of Jason's crimes, the multiple instances of fraud, the targeting of military families, the financial and emotional damage inflicted on the victims. She acknowledged his cooperation, but emphasized the deliberate nature of his actions. Mr. Hayes may not have initiated this scheme, Your Honor, but he was a willing and active participant. He betrayed not only his wife, but also his country by targeting those who serve it. Jason's attorney countered with arguments for leniency, Jason's lack of prior criminal history, his full cooperation with authorities, his genuine remorse. He presented letters from character witnesses, including Jason's former employers and friends, attesting to his otherwise good character. My client made terrible mistakes, Your Honor, driven by addiction and manipulation. But he has accepted responsibility for his actions and is committed to making amends. Throughout it all, Jason remained silent, his gaze fixed on the table before him. I found myself studying him, trying to reconcile this broken man with the husband I had loved. How had we come to this? How had 10 years of marriage ended in a federal courtroom, with one of us facing prison and the other picking up the pieces of a shattered life? Finally, Judge Watkins turned to Jason. Mr. Hayes, you have the right to address the court before sentencing. Do you wish to do so? Jason stood slowly, his hands trembling slightly. Yes, Your Honor. He turned, scanning the courtroom until his eyes found mine. For a moment, we simply looked at each other across the crowded room, a decade of shared history hanging in the air between us. I prepared a statement, he began, his voice wavering. But seeing my wife here today, his voice broke, and he paused to collect himself. Seeing Olivia, I realized that no prepared statement can adequately express what I need to say. He looked down at the paper in his hands, then set it aside. I stand before this court a convicted felon. I've admitted to fraud, to theft, to betrayal on a scale that still shocks me when I consider it. There's no excuse for what I did. No justification that can make it right. He turned again to face me directly. Olivia, I destroyed our marriage. I stole. He turned again to face me directly. Olivia, I destroyed our marriage. I stole your money, your trust, your future. I did it knowingly, repeatedly over years. My addiction doesn't excuse it. Elise's manipulation doesn't excuse it. Nothing does. Tears were streaming down his face now, but he made no move to wipe them away. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not even asking for understanding. All I'm asking is that someday when you think of me, you'll remember that there were good times too, that what we had wasn't all a lie. He turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I accept whatever sentence you impose. I know it won't undo the harm I've caused, but I hope it provides some measure of justice for Olivia and the other victims. And I promise you, when I've served my time, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, not to win back what I've lost, but because it's the right thing to do. The courtroom was silent as Jason sat down, His shoulders slumped as if a great weight had settled upon them. I realized I was gripping the bench in front of me, my knuckles white, my breathing shallow. Judge Watkins studied Jason for a long moment before speaking. "Mr. Hayes, this court has seen many defendants express remorse at sentencing. It's a common tactic, often insincere, but in your case, I believe your remorse is genuine." She shuffled the papers before her. "However, genuine remorse does not erase the harm done. Your crimes were serious, calculated, and continued over a significant period. They targeted a particularly vulnerable population, military families separated by deployment. Such actions demand significant consequences." She looked up, her gaze direct and unflinching. "Taking into account your cooperation, which has been substantial and valuable to the prosecution of other cases, I sentence you to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You will pay restitution to all identified victims in the full amount of their losses, plus interest and penalties." The gavel fell, and it was done. 4 years. Jason would be 42 when he got out, still young enough to rebuild a life, to start over as I was doing now. As the bailiff led him away, Jason turned one last time, his eyes finding mine across the courtroom. There was no plea in his gaze, no expectation, just a silent acknowledgement of what had been lost, and what could never be recovered. I remained seated as the courtroom emptied, trying to process the complex emotions swirling within me. Relief that justice had been served. Sadness for the man Jason might have been if not for his addiction. Anger at the years wasted, the trust betrayed. And underneath it all, a surprising sense of peace, as if some final door had closed on my old life, allowing me to step fully into the new one. Sophia found me there, sitting quietly in the emptying courtroom. "You okay?" I nodded, surprised to find it was true. "I think I am." "The sentence was fair," she said, sitting beside me. "Not too harsh, not too lenient." "It doesn't fix anything," I said quietly. "It doesn't give me back the years, the trust." "No," she agreed. "But it gives you a clean break, a chance to move forward without looking back." We sat in companionable silence for a moment. Then Sophia handed me a business card. "This is Melissa Chen. She's a realtor specializing in rural properties. I mentioned your land in Hood River and she said she'd be happy to connect you with builders in the area." I took the card, touched by her thoughtfulness. "Thanks. And this?" She handed me an envelope, "Just came through from the bank. The last of the restitution payments. You're officially made whole, at least financially." I slipped the envelope into my purse, knowing that the true wholeness I sought wouldn't come from financial restitution, but from the life I was building for myself, piece by piece. As we walked out of the courthouse together, Sophia asked, "What will you do now?" The question no longer filled me with uncertainty. "I'm going to Hood River tomorrow, meeting with an architect to start planning the house," she smiled. "That sounds like a good next step." It was more than a next step, I realized. It was a declaration of intent, a commitment to myself and my future. The house in Hood River wasn't just a building project, it was a symbol of my reconstruction, of my refusal to be defined by Jason's betrayal. We parted ways outside the courthouse, Sophia heading back to her office, me to my car for the drive to Vancouver. As I unlocked the door, I noticed a small envelope tucked under the windshield wiper. My name was written on it in Jason's familiar handwriting. I hesitated, then took it. Inside was a single key and a note. "Liv. If you're reading this, the sentencing is over, and I'm on my way to prison. I asked my attorney to leave this for you. It's the key to a storage unit at Westside Storage Unit 127. Inside is a box of photos I saved from our apartment ones I thought you might want someday. Family pictures mostly. Your parents' wedding photo that your mom gave us. The shot of you and Elena at the Grand Canyon. Things too important to lose in all this mess. I also left the deed to the land. I know Sophia already told you about it, but I wanted you to have the original document. It's yours, free and clear. Do with it whatever brings you peace. I won't write again unless you want me to. This is goodbye, at least for now. I meant what I said in court. What we had wasn't all a lie. I loved you the best way I knew how. It just wasn't good enough. Be happy, Liv. Build that house with the wraparound porch. Plant those gardens you always talked about. Live the life you deserve. Jason. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my purse. Then I got in my car and drove away from the courthouse, away from the past, toward whatever came next. 6 months later, I stood on the wraparound porch of my half-finished house, watching the sunset paint Mount Hood in shades of gold and pink. Construction had begun in May, the foundation poured in June, the framing completed by August. Now, in late September, the house was taking shape, walls up, roof on, windows installed. By Thanksgiving, it would be ready for me to move in. I designed it myself with help from an architect who specialized in energy-efficient homes. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, an open kitchen and living area, and this the wraparound porch that had been part of my dream for so long. It wasn't large, but it was exactly what I needed, a space of my own, built to my specifications, reflecting my tastes and preferences. The last 6 months had been a time of profound change. I'd officially retired from the Army, ending a 20-year career with honors and a comfortable pension. I'd finalized my divorce from Jason, a process made simpler by his incarceration and willingness to agree to my terms. I'd sold our apartment in Portland, putting the proceeds toward the construction of this house. I'd also begun consulting for a logistics company that specialized in humanitarian aid shipments, using my military experience in a new context on my own schedule. The work was challenging and rewarding, allowing me to continue serving in a way that felt meaningful while maintaining the freedom to build my new life. My mother had recovered fully from her surgery, her energy returning with each passing week. She and Elena had become regular visitors to the property, offering opinions on everything from paint colors to furniture placement. Their support had been unwavering, their love a constant in a time of upheaval. I'd continued attending the support group, finding strength in the shared experiences of women who understood what I'd been through. Some had reconciled with their spouses, others had moved on alone. All were finding their way forward, step by step, day by day. I'd even finally gone to the storage unit Jason had mentioned in his note. The family photos were there, carefully preserved in archival boxes, along with the original deed to the property, and unexpectedly, a small wooden box containing my grandmother's wedding ring, a family heirloom I'd thought lost in one of our many moves. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the cleared land where my garden would be next spring. I'd been studying permaculture design, planning a space that would provide food, beauty, and habitat for local wildlife. Another project for the future. Another piece of the life I was creating. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Still on for dinner, Mom made enchiladas." I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. Sunday dinners at Mom's had become a cherished ritual, a reminder of the family bonds that remained strong despite everything that had changed. As I turned to leave, I took one last look at the house, my house silhouetted against the evening sky. It wasn't finished yet, but it was getting there. Like me. I thought of Jason serving his sentence in a federal prison in Arizona. We hadn't spoken since the sentencing, though his attorney occasionally updated me on his progress. He was participating in addiction recovery programs, teaching graphic design to other inmates, working to make what amends he could from behind bars. I didn't know if I would ever fully forgive him. Some betrayals cut too deep for complete healing. But I was finding a way to integrate what had happened into my story without letting it define me. The anger that had once consumed me had gradually transformed into something quieter, more contemplative, not acceptance exactly, but understanding. We had both made choices that led us here. Jason's choices had been worse, more damaging, but I too had chosen to ignore signs, to prioritize career over communication, to believe what was convenient rather than what was true. The lessons had been hard-won, but I was learning them, to trust my instincts, to value transparency, to recognize that true strength lies not in independence, but in healthy interdependence. As I walked to my car, I noticed wildflowers growing along the newly graded driveway, purple asters and goldenrod, nature's own decoration for my homecoming. I picked a small bunch, arranging them in a makeshift bouquet to take to my mother's house. Beauty from ashes, life from loss, strength from adversity. I wasn't the woman I had been a year ago when I'd received that cruel message in my barracks room in Germany. I was someone new, someone shaped by betrayal and disappointment. Yes, but also by resilience and growth, by the discovery of my own capacity for adaptation and renewal. The road ahead was still uncertain in many ways. Would I ever trust enough to love again? Would I find the professional fulfillment I sought in my new career? Would this house truly become the home I envisioned? I didn't have all the answers yet. But for the first time in a very long time, I was asking the right questions, not what others expected of me, not what I should want, but what I truly desired for myself, for my one precious life. And that I was discovering made all the difference. As I drove away from my future home toward my family, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This wasn't the life I had planned, but it was becoming the life I needed, honest, purposeful, and authentically mine. From the ashes of betrayal, something new was rising, something stronger, truer, and infinitely more valuable than what had been lost. Me.